Welcome to the fourth installment in our series on the Great Wealth Transfer. Today, we're talking about the future of generational wealth building, how the mechanisms of wealth building may change, and how you can be prepared. I'm Jim Zahansky, Senior Partner and Chief Strategist at WHZ Strategic Wealth Advisors.
I'm Lysel Langevin, Managing Partner Advisory at WHC.
I'm Lawrence Hale, Senior Partner and Chief Investment Officer at WHC.
And I'm attorney Allison Poirier, partner at KKC Law.
Welcome. Together, we'll take you through everything you need to know about the Great Wealth Transfer and how to prepare. So let's get into it. Today, we're talking about the themes we've explored: transfer, generational change, women's wealth. And we'll talk about how you can turn all of those into a strong legacy for yourself and your family.
So I think this is going to be a really great discussion because we've covered so much ground, and this is where all the pieces really come together.
You know, I totally agree, Allison. And unfortunately, one of the things we've seen with generational wealth transfers is a big pitfall, and that's inactivity. That's basically not paying attention. You know, we think about planning, and the need to reiterate going back, looking at your plan, making sure it's up to date. And a lot of these documents can become outdated as things change, such as tax law, estate law, things like probate delays, unforeseen taxes. All of these things can come into play if you are not paying attention. So making sure that you're reiterating your goals, your values, your desires to your advisors, and allowing them to help you navigate this ever-changing landscape and stay on top of what you're ultimately trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, another is misalignment. I mean, you know, clearly in an estate plan, it has to characterize the inventory of assets we spoke about in previous episodes. And some of these may be concentrated in illiquid assets like, you know, a business or property or, you know, alternative investments. And, you know, the heirs may not be prepared for that responsibility to sort of unwind those assets. Or maybe the values, you know, that you had weren't communicated in the estate plan. So you might transfer $5 million to your heirs, but maybe they're not ready, either because they're not prepared to unwind what you've left them or aren't capable of, or, you know, maybe your plan lacks flexibility. So you may see the dissipation of value of those assets you left, which is not something that you probably intend when you're transferring wealth.
And I feel like that failure to plan or failure to update the plan is one of the biggest gaps when it comes to putting together a really comprehensive plan that's going to do what you actually want it to do. And the biggest piece of that sometimes I see is people get so focused on the wealth that they don't think about the incapacity. So an estate plan isn't just a will. It isn't just a trust. It's also the powers of attorney. It's the healthcare proxies. And then also just regularly meeting with your estate planning lawyer. As much as I know everybody loves hanging out with their lawyer, but you know, we keep you up to date. If laws have changed, if there's been real shifts in the courts, we might be able to give you some advice that's going to impact your plan. So kind of keeping your finger on the pulse by reviewing the plan, meeting with your trusted advisors is just going to close those gaps and make sure the plan works smoothly.
And we talk about that all the time, updating both financial and the estate plan. On the financial side, we're probably updating that at least once a year. And I think from an estate perspective, again, it's those life events and things, but typically it's at least 3 to 5 years, you're trying to look back and make sure that there's been no changes. But again, another pitfall is really the heirs being ready and just assuming that they're ready to take on those roles. And the fact is they probably won't be. I mean, we've seen so many cases where the next generation, they're not ready to take on either the money or the role of paying the bills, or they're not exactly sure how to pay those bills or where they're supposed to be going. And so engaging, setting that structure, and just knowing that sometimes there could be a little bit of a tension more than bringing the siblings together. Let's say that the siblings are inheriting in this fact, and really it's that maybe they don't necessarily agree on how things should be settled out. So anyway, it's really important, again, educating, making sure that they're aware of the situation and the structure so that transition can be simple.
Yeah, I mean, certainly building a coordinated plan is essential to any any planning you do. So, at WHZ, we consider this in sort of financial planning, investment management, and then, of course, some sort of estate structure that it's all aligned, right? So that, whatever assets you're putting into the estate structure are piled correctly, they're carrying the right amount of risk or values that's coordinated in the assets. So, to do this, sort of get into the financial planning part, you have to think about first defining your goals. What does this wealth mean to you? What goals are we funding? Step two is to build your roadmap that we've spoken about. How do we get to achieve those goals? Whether it's inclusive of your investment strategy, cash flow planning, a savings rate, the type of accounts you're saving in, and step three really is to execute. And as Allison has reiterated to us, monitor it frequently. Is the plan on the estate side and the legal structure built flexibly? Does it adapt to the needs of changing policy? Does it adapt to the needs of your changing values? All of those things are really essential to ensuring that you do, as we say at WHZ, plan well, invest well in order to live well. This framework really operates well because, when our clients go through changes, we can revisit that plan to be sure that in the end they can live well.
And an idiom I heard earlier in my career was, nobody fails to plan. Nobody plans to fail, but a lot of people fail to plan. And I think that often can be true. But, to carry on what you were saying, Jim, make sure that during that execution step, you really understand what your assets are. What are the different types? Identify where that wealth might reside, whether it's in retirement accounts or real estate, business interests, trusts, life insurance. What's the liquidity of each of those assets, and what's the titling, and how might those assets pass? Are they through beneficiaries versus a will versus a trust? What are the tax implications with those assets, and how liquid are they? Understand the timeline and your risk. All of these are factors that need to be considered as you're beginning that execution phase, and that's something we do quite well, if I toot our own horn, at WHC. And I think bringing those pieces to a competent estate attorney who can then make sense of those from a structural standpoint and say, okay, based upon tax law, based upon what your goals are, here's the right way to structure those.
Yeah, and as those assets shift over time, so not only do things like births, deaths, marriages, those things should automatically trigger you to take a look at your plan, but assets change. So when you're younger, maybe it's more cash or you bought your house, but as you are accumulating more assets in retirement accounts and say, oh, well, I would love to leave this person X dollars. And, oh, I'll just put them as the beneficiary as my IRA. Not understanding that, well, taxes have to come out first. So the bottom line there isn't what they're receiving. So kind of with that asset shift, as your assets change, your plan might change too. So just really taking that into account. And then also if you're working with an estate planning attorney, plus you're working with an advisor, or you have other professionals like an accountant or an insurance agent, making sure all these people are talking together, because to some extent we're working in a silo. And I know I'm preparing this document, but if I don't know that you have some very complicated or specific goals that you're working with your advisor on, my plan might be wholly inappropriate. So kind of allowing everybody to talk together and talk about the legal side versus the tax side versus the financial advisory side, it's really going to set up a comprehensive plan that is well suited to your goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And carrying out that comprehensive plan, again, we've sort of stressed this throughout, and it's including the heirs in the plan and not just telling them, but engaging them and showing them, okay, here's where the documents are, here's how my bills and things are paid, here's where my investments are, who my financial advisor is, making sure that if there's meetings that they're attending, I know we often will offer to have our clients bring their next generation, like, oh, as they're getting into their late 70s, 80s, it's sort of like, okay, would you like to include your power of attorney or your son or daughter in those conversations so that they are part of the plan and they have an understanding generally of how things are currently operating and what the values of their parent might be. So those, again, not just telling them, but making sure that they're aware of the full picture and how it can be executed and carrying out their wishes. So.
Yeah, Liza, legacy is a lot more than just the dollars. It's, what legacy are you going to leave your family in terms of values, habits, purpose. Many of the clients of our firm, we implement something called a legacy blueprint that combines their wealth, their philanthropy, family governance, and giving to make sure that all of these components of a legacy are passed on, incorporated into conversations, into their plans, into their documents, so that they're able to see those come to fruition into the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, these blueprints are always interesting conversations because, it requires alignment from the partners at the table. And it should, I think one that we recently did, which gives you an example of what this blueprint might look like, but it sort of combines these things we've been talking about, right? So 10% of what the assets, get passed after life in this blueprint were left to philanthropy. So there's the values in action. They obviously valued leaving to, organizations they felt were making an impact in their community. 20% was to educational funds for their grandchildren. So this again reflects the importance to this couple of leaving money so that their grandchildren could go to school and have less debt. And then the rest went into trust, that with other intentions for goals. But, in essence, it allowed this family to think through, I want to leave something to philanthropy that's meaningful to me and to children for educational purposes that's meaningful. And then the rest, in trust outright into family afterward. But this blueprint was not born from a whim. It was born from planning and came from the values and ideals of this particular family. And most families we talk to get to this point. If not, we really try to help them think it through so that, they have a success beyond that.
Yeah, and I think how you get there, it's not we sit down, we have one meeting this month, maybe next month, and that's the plan.
Yeah.
It's you're meeting every year. You're seeing these clients grow, their family grows, and their values change. And it's a shift more from just, okay, let's make sure we have enough money to get the kids to, wow, we have a lot of money for the kids. Now we can pass it on to the grandkids. We can support these charities. So just watching that plan shift along with those values and kind of updating that blueprint. And also, it's something we've talked about a lot with this series is kind of keeping that next generation involved. So not only just, okay, here's the plan and maybe it's changing a little bit every year, but after I'm gone, I want to continue to see that happen. I want the trustees continue to meet with the beneficiaries of the trust. I want, you to start talking to your kids, my grandkids, about how this is going to flow down to them one day and just keeping those lines of communication open.
Yeah, and I think one question that we have families and clients think about is what do we want future generations to remember us for? Whether it's, okay, is it we passed down the house, we passed down money or a business, or was it the impact that we made? And I think that can be such a powerful message to that next generation, and making sure that their legacy is carried forward. And it was like, okay, you hear clients come in and talk about, well, my parents always wanted to pay for college and they want me to do that for my kids. So it's like, okay, they have a strong feeling about making sure that the generations are educated. So those can be lasting legacies that can be set up for many generations, and pretty neat to see when you have multiple families that are, everybody's going to college and making good careers out of it. So
Yeah, there's as we proceed down this idea of the great wealth transfer, this series has definitely highlighted some ideas of how to be sure that you take some action, that there are some steps to being successful in that wealth transfer. And along the way, across the three other episodes, we've given you some ideas, no matter who you are, how to start that. Just to sort of recap or to have you think about it, if you're working with a financial advisory firm now, be sure you have a conversation about this, this idea of the wealth transfer review. Where are your assets going right now? And how have you titled them right? Are they into your intentions? Bring in your advisor and make sure that maybe you participate, have your family participate. Once you consider what that great wealth transfer looks like to you and your family, bring your family into it and maybe use your advisor to help you with that. or have a clear communication plan so that you can, sort of map the timelines and trigger events. These could be like, retirement, or if you're selling a business, or maybe there's a gifting process you're doing for philanthropy, or maybe there's something you've sold that's really important to your plan. And it's also important that along these timelines is to develop your, heir education strategy. This gets to the point, are they ready to help manage what you've left them in a way, or do I need to think about my plan differently? And then lastly, set, and Allison reminded of this throughout the series, is what are the check-in points? So, how often should we be looking at this? And with our team and at WHZ and with clients, it's usually annually, right? Because there are things that change that could require you to update documents or to update your plan. These can be things that we've discussed in this series, like values, life changes, beliefs. Those that inherit might have the ability or not have the ability to execute the plan. All of these require check-ins on it, check-ins on your documents, periodic check-in plans, and then re-education of your family should it change.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times they do stress estate planning at those major life events, those births, those marriages, those deaths. But sometimes it's just passage of time. I mean, that's not every couple of years, I say, and I think Liesl at one point you said 3 to 5 years, and that's kind of the perfect time frame. That's usually enough time where something might have changed, even if you don't think that something major has shifted. I mean, there might just be, again, some change in the law, or somebody's moved out of state, somebody's now married. These changes can happen every couple of years, so it's so important to continue to reevaluate at those major life events, but also just even if you haven't already, every couple of years. So reviewing and keeping your plan updated to reflect those changes in your life, ensuring that the documents are still structured the way you want them to be structured. For example, a lot of times people, when they first start off with estate planning, they just say, well, let's just get that simple will. Well, maybe that simple will isn't really doing everything you need it to do now. Maybe we should talk more about revocable trusts. And maybe when you're younger, I mean, we all think we're Superman, we're invincible. I don't need that power of attorney. But okay, I'm in my 40s now. The odds are something could happen. So just really making sure that plan evolves and you're adding on pieces and adjusting. And engaging those people, again, that are stepping in to take care of you or stepping into becoming the beneficiaries, making sure they're involved in the planning process, understanding the why and not just your sign on the line.
I'm sure we all could give stories about people who haven't done this, who come to us a little bit too late, and how difficult that can be for their heirs or their spouse, or if they're losing some of their memory or things like that. Planning at the 11th hour can be a very trying and difficult thing. So all great advice.
Yeah, trying, difficult emotionally, and usually not with the same strategic options they had during their life, which tends to pass along less generational wealth, or adds certainly a burden of doing it during a difficult time for the family.
Yeah, and I mean, we've gotten those calls where, somebody's sick and I need you to come to the hospital, and we've done it. But it's more of just, it's a fire drill. It's not a comprehensive plan. It's just hurry up, let's get the bare minimum in place. So yeah, you don't want to, I always say when people ask, well, when's the right time to do estate planning? I say when you don't need it. Yeah.
All right. So, legacy is a lot more than just the dollars. And to give you some statistics, that by the second generation, about 70% of wealth is actually gone. And by the third generation, about 90%. So what else is part of your legacy? And those are things like passing on values, habits, purpose. And we work with clients and try to help them build something we call a legacy blueprint. And that combines things such as wealth, but also philanthropy, family governance, giving, and other values that can be passed to the generation and not squandered if unplanned for.
Thank you.
A sincere thank you to Allison, Lawrence, and Liesl, and of course our listeners, because we hope this series has given everyone who's listening a roadmap and motivation to turn the great wealth transfer that's going to happen over the next few decades into a meaningful legacy for you and your family. If you'd like to work with us at WHZ Wealth Advisors or KKC Law to explore your plan, please reach out. For tools, resources, and conversation starters about generational wealth, estate planning, download our free guide, Smart Strategies for Generational Wealth. at whzwealth.com or kkc-law.com. We appreciate your time, and we hope it's helped you to plan, invest, and live well so that you can have absolute confidence, unwavering partnership for life.